everyone to the Sister Stories podcast. This podcast is aimed at marveling at God's sovereignty in each of our lives as women and at encouraging one another via our stories. My name is Sophie, and today I am joined by Laura.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. So first of all, Laura, can you tell us a little bit who you are?
Of course. So my name's Laura Sweetman. I am married to Tom Sweetman, who you will all probably know, who is the assistant pastor here at Cornerstone. And I must just say, I'm actually very excited that it's me behind this mic and not my husband, so I can say I've been there and done it too. So yeah, thanks for having me.
You're taking over. Wow. Great. And so obviously we're going to talk today a little bit about your testimony and how you came to know the Lord Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
But I would like us to start with your family background, what your childhood was like, how you grew up, really.
Of course, yeah. So I grew up in North London, which some of you might be able to tell from some of my accent occasionally. I don't pronounce my T and H's, which sometimes drives Tom mad. So yeah, I grew up in North London with my mum and dad. There's just the three of us. And my mum and dad, they're not Christians. My mum does, I think, believe that there is a God. She can see kind of that the world is probably governed by something bigger and greater than us. But I was never really brought up, to really appreciate that God wanted an involvement in our lives. But, happy childhood, of course. Enjoyed, spending time with mum and dad. But that's kind of where I started.
Great. Okay. And so can you tell us a little bit how, from that background, you came to hear of the gospel?
Yeah, it's interesting, actually. So I did go to a Church of England primary school. So I guess, from a very young age, I did learn truths about God, in the hymns you sing, all those awful ones, you clap your hands and all the ones that are just, stick in your head now for years. But I guess I did, from a very early age, appreciate that there was something bigger than us. And I did believe that there was a God. I did look at creation and kind of think, this world is amazing. How could this just all be by chance? So I did grow up in that kind of environment. But there was a wonderful family who lived down my mum and dad's road, who were a family that attended a church around the corner from my mum and dad. And my mum started to take me to their equivalent of Monday Tots group when I was a very small toddler, and built kind of relationships with that family there, and they lived down my mum and dad's road. And I think this is a real kind of testament to people that are involved in things like Monday Tots all the way through to youth group, is don't give up, because basically what happened was, as I got older and was then old enough to go to youth group, which was however many years in between, the family down the road that attended the church remembered my mum, remembered me, saw us on the road and said, would Laura like to come along to youth group? So that's really how I started to kind of hear about God and think about God in a greater way than I had before, when I started to go to youth group at the age of 11.
Wow, that's amazing. I wonder what your first reaction was to being maybe diving a little bit deeper into these things.
It's an interesting question. And to tell you the truth, I can't really remember. I think probably I just soaked it all in probably for a long time. And I mean, I became a Christian at the age of 17 and I started going to youth group at the age of 11. So it was a long old journey, I guess, in that sense. And just probably just hearing truths about God and Jesus for that whole time, really, and just slowly probably understanding more of who he was and what he'd done in that kind of gradual way.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. Right. So obviously you are now in Cornerstone, so somehow you've made your way from North London to Kingston. How did that come about?
Yeah, so basically I became a Christian at one of my friend's baptisms, who went to the youth group, and I remember basically just being blown away about I think I was about 16, 17. And I remember at his baptism, the pastor just saying something like, you know, that if we're not right with God, then we're in trouble, basically. And I remember that really shocking me, because I knew a lot about God and I knew a lot about, you know, Jesus and what he'd done, but it never had really hit me personally. And that night I just remember thinking, goodness me, you know, I'm really not right with the Lord. But you probably ask me more questions about that in a minute. But I ended up basically the next year coming to Kingston to university. And that's how I ended up here at Cornerstone.
Wow. Okay. So yes, what can you tell us a bit more? What happened on that baptism night? What hit you particularly, and how you came to follow Jesus?
Yeah. So I guess it was just that realization that if there was a God, which I believe there was, he wanted a relationship with me, and he died for me. And I just was not living like that was the case, or ever really, I think, before that had seen my need for that. And I just remember standing there at the end during the last song and thinking, I'm not right with God, and I need to be. Yeah. And if I'm honest, even though I'd had years of teaching in that sense, I guess I didn't really understand what it meant to be a Christian still. But I do remember just thinking very vividly, I need to do something about this. I don't feel comfortable with this. And feeling really just uneasy in myself and in my heart and in my head about this all. And I remember that they were giving out tracts at the end. And some of you will know, I think it was John T. Alcock preaching, who, if you've ever been to Contagious, you might know John T, or you might know John T from some kind of circles at Contagious or FIEC and things like that. But I took this tract that they were giving out at the end, and I remember, again, really, really vividly, just taking it home, saying hi to mum and dad, going upstairs, sitting on my bed, and reading this information. And it was then really, as I read it, I thought, I've got to pray this prayer at the end. I've got to ask Jesus to be my saviour. And I don't really understand what that means for me now, but I've got to do this. And I remember praying that, and I would say that was the night I became a Christian. It was then kind of a real gradual process of growth for me, but that was really vivid. And interestingly, it's funny how the Lord does these things sometimes, isn't it? The tract I actually took home is called Crossover to Life, and it's written by Pete Woodcock. So yeah. And I remember coming to uni and going to something that was called Late Night Church then, and walking into the old hub and seeing these booklets on the side. And I was like, oh, I became a Christian, you know, through using one of those. And then it turned out that Pete wrote it. So, hey, isn't that amazing? Isn't that a testament to Pete? Thank you, Pete. You've been very influential in my life.
Nice. And clearly direction of come to Cornerstone. Right. That's amazing. And so how you said that then it was a kind of gradual growth as we've all experienced throughout our Christian lives. Can you describe that a little bit more? What did you maybe learn after that? Yeah,
lots and lots. I think so that was when I was 17, and it wasn't long after. I was baptised not too long after I became a Christian at my church back in Enfield. But really when I came to university, because I was still such a young Christian, I did actually struggle at first to settle into a church. I found that really hard. And some of you will probably laugh at this, but I remember, you know, flitting between different churches and, you know, people like Rachel and Naomi I was friends with at university through the Christian Union. In the end, were like, why don't you come to Cornerstone? I remember going to an open home at the Cooper's house, and Phil was like, why are you here? You don't even come to this church, which was fair enough.
Which is his way of recruiting people, isn't it?
Exactly. And anyway, ended up here. And I think things like we used to do student breakfasts where you'd come before university and you could just ask any questions, and just hearing faithful teaching, biblical teaching, week in, week out, just really grew me and really impacted me. And having real conversations with, you know, Christian friends who I met here and at Christian Union, and just learning to live out what it meant to be a Christian was just really, really huge for me in my university years. Yeah. Yeah.
And church is obviously the place to do that. So that's really precious that you found Cornerstone and was able to continue to grow after that.
Absolutely.
That's great. I wonder what your parents' reaction was when you became a Christian, because surely that must have been maybe a little bit strange for them. Yes,
it was. And I think in many ways, I'm sure they won't mind me saying, it still is. I think they saw it become a big thing in my life. And, you know, my mum won't mind me saying, but she's questioned, what is it Laura's involved in? Is this a cult? Is this some kind of weird thing that she's kind of dedicating all of her time to? But I think that's missing the point, that actually my dedication and involvement to church and the people here stems from a love of the Lord Jesus. And that's why I spend so much time doing what we do. I think probably it's fair to say that they thought it was a stage in my life that I might grow out of it. But actually they saw that it became a bigger thing, probably. And then when, after university, when I started dating Tom, and then Tom was like, yeah, I'm going to start a job in ministry. I think they were just like, okay, this is now never going to change in Nora's life. Like this is a thing. And, you know, obviously still love and accept me for who I am. But I think they don't believe that you need a personal relationship with Jesus like I do. And so, yeah, they have found that weird, but if anything, it's only, you know, from a worldly point of view, made me a better person. So in that sense, you know, they're kind of happy in that sense with it, even if they find it a little bit strange.
That makes sense. Right. You haven't told us much about Tom, actually. What happened there? I think there's quite a story, isn't there?
Oh, there's a story there. There's a big story there. Yeah, I mean, so Tom wasn't a Christian when we first met each other at university. So we did similar modules together. So he studied geology. I studied environmental hazards and disaster management, but had to do some geology modules at university. So I met Tom kind of as a friend through that. And then, you know, we were really good friends, and his brother became unwell. His brother had a brain tumour during our time at university, and Tom's parents are Christians, and Tom knew that I was a Christian, was the only friend he had that was a Christian, and that obviously just made him really contemplate life and death and you know, what might happen and how would it be if he was in that position, and just I guess brought all that kind of to the surface. And it's like reverse evangelism, really. He then asked me whether he could come to church with me, and I didn't do anything and just brought him along. And then anyway, he became a Christian, and loads of people thought he was coming to church just for me, which is totally wrong.
Thank you for clarifying that.
That's okay, Sophie. I just want to put that out there so it's on record. That is not the case. But we were very good friends, and he became a Christian. And then, we started going out after university. Yeah.
Wow. Great.
And there we go. The rest is history.
Yeah, definitely. As we say. Great. So I would like us to focus a bit more on the near history, if that makes sense. Not that it's history yet, but just talking about this year, which has been very strange for all of us, and we've all had different experiences. But is there something you've learned in particular that God has taught you throughout this year?
Oh, Sophie, honestly, it's just a lesson I have to learn my whole life. I mean, I think that there's a smaller thing which I just want to say first. I think the Lord's really shown me what I took for granted as well. I mean, just the privilege of having a church that does so much, and, you know, you can be so involved in people's lives and in relationship with people, to kind of have that taken away so much, I think really has shown me how much I took for granted. Like, I'm not going to lie, sometimes on a Sunday, the last thing I wanted to do was bring a slow cooker to church and have another long day, and, you know, be exhausted by the end of it. But it's always such a joy when you do it. And actually, when you do strip that back, it's just made me realise how grateful I should be, and how much I love everyone at Cornerstone, and how much, you know, it's such a blessing. So I think, you know, that's a lesson I need to keep hold of. But I think bigger lessons, you know, which has kind of been a constant theme in my life for a few years, you know, since we kind of started trying for children, and that wasn't necessarily as easy as I thought it might be for us. Or, you know, dealing with then COVID when you was pregnant and whatever else. I think the Lord's always trying to show me that he has a plan for my life, and that it's the best plan there is. And I don't need to fret, and I don't need to worry, that he works out all things. And actually, you know, the verse, be still and know that I am God, is something I have to cling on to constantly. Also, the verse in Jeremiah 29 around, you know, I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Because who would have said going into lockdown and shutting down church would have been the best thing? I would never have said that was the best thing for me.
That's right.
But actually, you know, he's shown me how to depend upon him again, how to trust him, how to remember he is sovereign over all things, and to hold on to kind of his greatness. And that's a constant theme that's been running throughout my life in many different ways. And again, it's a shame I have to keep learning it in many ways. It's a real shame I have to keep learning it. But, you know, the Lord is gracious and kind, and has reminded me more than ever to just cling on to those things and cling on to him, and remember he is big, much bigger than I am, and that's a great thing.
Yeah, that's right. I think we all have to learn that lesson constantly, don't we? We haven't mentioned that you have two beautiful children.
Yeah.
I'm very sorry. We've kept them the best for last, I guess. So Caleb and Imogen, how has that been with two children now at home?
Yeah, I mean, a real blessing. But I guess I did find it difficult being in lockdown and then having Imogen. I think some people take to parenthood very naturally. I did find it quite difficult for the first few months. You know, I'll admit saying that. I just found the transition from 1 to 2 particularly hard, and particularly in lockdown when you couldn't just go around someone's house and have a cup of tea and let the kids play. I found that really hard. But again, you know, the Lord's been teaching me to depend upon him, actually, that I don't have to try and struggle on in my own strength, which I do all the time. I can admit that I can't do it on my own and call upon him for help, because in my weakness, he is proved to be strong, right? And that's something he has reminded me of particularly. But they are a joy. They are, two wonderful children. Imogen's such a chilled baby, bless her. So it's just really lovely. We have a lot of fun together as a family. Yeah, they're lovely.
Nice, great. That's a huge blessing, isn't it? Yeah. And to the church as well. And so lastly, I wonder if you have some advice that you would like to share, maybe with younger Christians, or maybe younger parents as well. That could be really precious, I'm sure.
I guess it's probably similar to what I've said. I think we just need to remember that we don't have to struggle on in our own strength, and we don't have to try and pretend we have everything under control, because we don't really, do we? We're not over our own lives. And actually, for me, certainly, when I think I'm in control, it all falls apart and I'm not in control. And actually, you know, just remember, it's okay to, remember we're not okay and we need the Lord's help, and to just depend upon him, that he's so much bigger than we are. So I would say keep on, doing that, pour out our hearts to him when we need to, cast our cares upon him, lighten our loads upon him, and to just be reminded of all the times in our lives that we can look back retrospectively and remember that he is in control. Because I think if you're anything like me, you forget that. And then the next struggle comes on in life or something and you forget.
Yes.
You forget he's in control, and you have to be reminded, and just keep on clinging to him, really. I guess that would be my advice.
Oh, thank you so much.
It's okay.
And thank you for your story and for sharing that with us. So that's all for this episode, everyone. But join us again next time.